that I was stupid. I experienced this when I went to public school and I entered high school with the designation of retardation. I could see amongst my schoolmates that they entered these places called school with fear. Today, in 2014, the Indigenous learners of Canada continue to hold the lowest graduation rates in the country. So we're talking about equity. When are we going to begin to include Indigenous learners in this notion of equity? Children continue to graduate without a full graduation. And most children, when you look at all of the statistics across this country, when Aboriginal children graduate, they graduate with a completion graduation and not a full graduation that brings them into post-secondary options. Here, in this land, in this country, where so much has been taken from the lands of these same Indigenous children, why do they continue to not have the education that is the right of every human being? In languages, only in the report from First Peoples in 2010, when we counted how many people are fluent in a First Nations language, what we learned that there are only 5% of our population speaks fluently our language. It's an older generation, and every winter, many of them pass on into the spirit world. The work that we do is really racing against time. The work with Indigenous languages in this country has rested on the shoulders of people who work without recognition and with very few resources. Because if you look at the kind of resources that's available to us to revitalize our languages, to promote our language learning, it's a very small amount of money that comes from the federal government and the provincial governments, the governments that took it away. But we continue. No matter what this country has done to try to wipe away our languages, they continue to exist. And that's why we call the exhibition at Royal BC Museum Living Languages. Even though we know that our languages are on the verge of extinction, they continue. And we want to focus on that. In order to be able to do the work that we do, we need allies. We need people to help us. We need people to work alongside us and to share with us, and to share the work and the load and the expertise with us. The working languages are included in many First Nations in Canada. It's about reclaiming and recovering. There are languages in this country that have not been spoken for 150 years. And those communities, those language communities are working to revive those languages. They exist in prayers that are sung and spoken in churches, and they exist in notes taken by the early settlers. Many times, our languages must compete against French and English to survive, even to have the right of signage. Many of the places are revitalizing languages. The languages exist, they're spoken by some of the people, and so the work is to revive the languages within the community, to create new speakers, to reawaken the language use amongst the people where the language has been beaten out of them through school. And the work is also to bring it into this century, to use the tools that are available to us today. So the work, I think, is extremely broad. We have to overcome the ideology of contempt that exists with the learning and the teaching and the fostering of Indigenous languages. We have to be able to overcome this ideology together. We have to overcome the idea that of language social Darwinianism. The idea that First Nations languages in this country don't have the right, don't have the strength to exist. That English and French are the more civilized and stronger languages, and they have the right to exist, but Indigenous languages do not. We have to overcome this. I'm going to skip some of these because our time is getting short. There are many language initiatives taking place in this country that really are the jewels that can be found in this country. Many of the ideas that are practiced, that have been dreamed up by people in communities, in partnership with many others, with linguists, with educators, with those allies committed to help. And they've been brought around the world because languages are the strength of people. Languages are the identity of people. And that's why there has been such a concerted effort to destroy them. But the work continues. There are places in this country where people have started schools in a First Nations language. Coming to this university in September will be a young man who began his life with hearing his language because his young parents relearned their language and made a commitment that that's the language he would hear. When he became 3 years old, they started a language immersion program. He's graduating next week. He is an example, like many others, that have used the same tactic. He's an example that shows that because of the strength of his language learning, he can learn any language. Because of the confidence he gained in knowing who he is, he can face any challenge. He can hope, and he can strive and believe that he has a future. We did a project here at this university where we brought new language learners to learn on the land with their new language teachers. And we brought with us fluent speakers. And I learned in that project how the people who are fluent, who I thought were fluent in their language, believed themselves to not be fluent. And that it was important for us to build safe places for learning, safe places for asking questions, safe places for feeling and admitting to these feelings of inadequacy and incompetence, and together to work towards overcoming them so that they can appreciate what they know and share it with the next generation of speakers. So we must reconnect the generations that in all of the programs that we build, we must reconnect the language to all areas of the community, including reconnecting the life of a school and the life of a community. Because education, that in the way that we've built it in these modern times, we strive in education to disconnect children from their previous generations, from their parents, and we strive to disconnect education from the community, and we strive to disconnect education from the land. That kind of education does not work for us, cannot work for us, and it doesn't work for all children. So I was going to spend some time talking about collaborations and what we've learned from them. But because of time, I'm going to leave it at that. And thank you for spending time listening to me. And I wish you all the best in the choices you make, the decisions you make, and in the work that you do. Thank you.